Emily stood quietly in the shadow of the large oak tree, her hands folded nervously in front of her. The air was heavy with the smell of dust and old wood as her late father-in-law's belongings were divided. Her in-laws, dressed in fine clothes and dripping with smugness, gathered around like vultures circling a feast. They exchanged knowing glances, waiting for the moment to humiliate her. When her name was called, a set of tarnished keys was dropped into her palm. "Here," her brother-in-law said with a laugh, pointing toward the driveway. "That rusty old van, that's your inheritance." The words dripped with mockery, followed by bursts of laughter from the rest of the family. To them, it was a joke, a way to remind her that she was the poor widow, the outsider who never truly belonged. Emily looked at the van, a dented, rust-covered relic that barely seemed drivable. Her cheeks flushed with embarrassment, but she forced a small smile. She would not give them the satisfaction of seeing her break. Quietly, she whispered a thank you and slipped the keys into her pocket. As the family continued dividing the finer treasures, silverware, jewelry, and antiques, Emily walked toward the van alone. The paint was chipped, the tires worn, yet something inside her stirred. It wasn't much, but it was hers. What they mocked as worthless, she chose to accept with dignity. Little did anyone know, this old van would soon reveal a secret far greater than anyone imagined. The van groaned and rattled as Emily drove it down the narrow country road, its engine coughing with every mile. People stared as she passed, some shaking their heads, others whispering behind her back. To them, the rusty old vehicle was a symbol of her poverty, a rolling joke that echoed the cruel laughter of her in-laws. But Emily saw something different. She saw possibility. She saw a way to keep moving forward, even when the world expected her to stop. Soon, the van became more than just her mode of transportation, it became a lifeline for others. When her elderly neighbor, Mrs. Turner, needed groceries, Emily loaded them into the back and delivered them with a warm smile. When a single mother down the street had no way to take her children to school, Emily offered them a ride, the kids piling into the squeaky seats with laughter that filled the silence of her own grief. On Sundays, she drove volunteers to the town's shelter, the rusty van carrying boxes of food, blankets, and hope. Yes, the van was dented, chipped, and far from beautiful. But to Emily, it was sturdy, dependable, almost like a friend that refused to give up. And with every mile, she found herself healing in ways she never thought possible. What the world mocked as junk was slowly becoming a vessel of kindness, carrying not just people and supplies, but also dignity, compassion, and love. It was late one evening when the van finally gave out. Emily had just dropped off blankets at the shelter and was on her way home when the engine sputtered, coughed, and fell silent in the middle of the road. She sighed, pulling it to the side, her hands gripping the wheel tightly. For a moment, fear crept in. What if this was the end of the only thing keeping her afloat? The next morning, she called on Mr. Harris, the town's elderly mechanic who had known her husband since childhood. He shook his head as he slid under the van, muttering about old junkers and lost causes. But minutes later, his voice changed. "Emily," he called, his tone unsteady, "you'd better come see this." She knelt beside him, confused, as he tapped on the underside of the van. Where rust had flaked away, a glimmer shone through, bright, unmistakable gold. The panels weren't ordinary metal at all. They were carefully hidden sheets of solid gold, tarnished by years of dirt and weather but still gleaming underneath. Emily's eyes widened, her breath catching in her throat. She couldn't believe it. The same van that had been mocked, dismissed, and laughed at was, in truth, priceless. Her heart pounded, not with greed, but with awe. All this time, she had been driving a treasure. And yet, she realized, its greatest value wasn't in the gold, it was in the lives it had already touched before the secret was ever revealed. Emily sat at her small kitchen table that night, the mechanic's words echoing in her mind, "This van is worth more than you can imagine." The keys lay before her, glinting under the light, suddenly heavier with the weight of possibility. For the first time in years, she had the power to change her life completely. She could buy a beautiful home, secure her son's future, and finally live without fear of tomorrow. But as she closed her eyes, she saw the faces of those who had ridden in the van, the children laughing on their way to school, Mrs. Turner smiling with her groceries in hand, the shelter volunteers holding boxes of food. Those memories pulled at her heart more strongly than any dream of wealth ever could. Emily knew this wasn't just about her. It was about everyone who had walked beside her through hardship, everyone who had once needed a helping hand. The gold inside the van wasn't meant to sit in a vault or fund a life of comfort, it was meant to create something bigger. With quiet resolve, Emily made her decision. She sold part of the hidden treasure and began pouring it back into the community. She rebuilt the crumbling shelter, opened scholarships for children who thought college was impossible, and repaired broken homes where families huddled in the cold. The rusty van that once embarrassed her had become the heartbeat of hope, carrying not just wealth, but renewal for an entire town. Months later, the little town was almost unrecognizable. Streets once lined with broken fences and weary faces now brimmed with laughter and possibility. The shelter stood tall and warm, filled with beds, books, and meals for anyone in need. Families who once struggled in silence now had roofs repaired, children with backpacks, and hope that tomorrow could be better than today. At the heart of it all was Emily, and the van. No longer rusty and forgotten, it had been lovingly restored, polished until the faint golden shimmer peeked proudly through its panels. It wasn't just a vehicle anymore, it was a symbol. A reminder that what the world discards as worthless can hold unimaginable value if seen through the eyes of love and faith. One afternoon, her in-laws drove through town. Their laughter faded as they saw crowds gathered around Emily, clapping and cheering, children racing beside the glowing van. She wasn't flaunting riches, nor seeking revenge. She stood with quiet grace, surrounded by the very people whose lives she had lifted. Her brother-in-law's face went pale as he realized the junk they mocked had changed everything. But Emily didn't look at them with bitterness. She only smiled, her heart full. For she had learned the greatest truth of all: gold may shine, but kindness glows brighter. The van had carried her through humiliation, through struggle, and into a future where compassion became the real inheritance, and that wealth could never rust.